I thought I had lost my best friend. Turns out she faked her death to get with my husband. I had lost everything when I lost Renee. We had met his children at only 5 years old. We have had over 2 decades together through thick and thin. She gave the most wonderful speech at my wedding. I was an only child, but Renee is my sister in the truest sense. When I got the news of the accident, I was inconsolable, just totally beside myself until I realized the truth. I'm not sure if knowing she was gone forever is worse than knowing what I know now about her. Losing her meant losing everything. But after everything we've been through, now it feels like half of my life is a lie. As kids, we joked around a lot. We especially enjoyed playing pranks not only on each other but on everyone we knew. Our parents hated them, but we were just having fun. Over time, I grew accustomed to her antics, and I could smell a fresh prank brewing from a mile away, especially if I was the target. There are certain holes in things missing, puzzle pieces. People think that lies are added, information you can look at and understand. But lies and pranks are about what is missing from the picture. In the empty space, I could form a picture of Renee and what she intended. Once at theater camp, she had faked being sick so she could sneak away. She was supposed to be in her cabin with the flu while she was actually out moving furniture around in the faculty cabin. I only called her out because there were no tissues on her bedside table. She had medicine, but none of it was taken. Missing puzzle pieces. A month after her passing, I found the first missing piece. I was helping her mother clean out and sort old keepsakes. We were both trying to move on and hope putting things away would help. We had some wine, opened up a few boxes, and began to conclude Renee's life by remembering her. I sobered up immediately when I saw it. Her calendar. It was a monthly whiteboard. The plans from the month of her passing were still marked in black, dry erase, except the few weeks before her passing were completely empty. You have to understand that Renee is a busy woman. She was not one to leave a single weekend unadorned with visits to friends or family. She marked her previous weeks nearly full and then nothing. It was just the kind of Renee-shaped hole I knew from so many years together. But this wasn't a prank. She'd never do something so hurtful. Our pranks were silly and fun and not a tear was ever shed. I stared at the calendar and said nothing to her mother. I took a mental note of the last few appointments to try and find a pattern. I must have looked rather grim, but I passed it off as grief. The only thing I felt was suspicion. Renee had made 3 visits somewhat regularly, dry cleaners, movie night, and trips to the grocery store. I looked at showtimes for past films and they seemed to coincide with movies I knew she had seen. I was even with her for one of them. Trips to the grocery store were harder to verify. I had to convince some poor kid working the night shift that I had something stolen from my car. I asked to take a look at the security footage, and while he helped someone else, I quickly scanned for Renee at the time she had listed on her calendar. Sure enough, I was able to find her, always at night and always buying a great many things. I couldn't tell anything specific from the footage, but her cart was always full when she left. This wasn't strange on its own, but she took home a full cart 3 times a week for her small apartment. Then nothing. I drove straight to the laundromat with more questions than answers. I called my husband along the way. It seemed, from the way he spoke, that he was worried about me. Who could blame me for losing my head after losing Renee? He told me to call off the search for more, to just come home and deal with my loss. I reassured him that I would. Just after checking on Renee's last whereabouts, there was really only one laundromat in town. I knew Renee had mentioned them before. I explained a version of my situation, trying to hunt down anything related to the last week of my best friend. The manager pulled up their digital records and explained Renee had not been there for months. I thanked them and left rather disheartened. I felt that maybe this was all nothing and I really was losing it. I drove home to the arms of my loving husband, Michael. He could tell I was rather distraught, and I told him about the groceries and the laundromat and just how the missing chunks of Renee were adding up. He grew silent, and at the time I thought he was just really worried for me. He told me I was looking into things too closely and I was hurting myself with grief. He said I needed a little time away and suggested a little vacation, a weekend away with him to process my thoughts. It admittedly sounded a lot better than how I felt at that moment, and I agreed. We started packing our bags that evening, planning to leave the moment Michael returned from work. I was working from home at the time, and my duties were easy enough. I tried to focus on work that day, but the missing pieces were eating at me. I tried to occupy myself by updating my own calendar, wondering if I suddenly disappeared, and who might look over my recent tasks. I wasn't as dutiful in scheduling as Renee, but I had always noted items for work for both myself and my husband. I checked some recent milestones off my list, and I noticed Michael had some work projects he was busy with. I was hoping, for his sake, that he'd have enough time to finish his projects before our vacation. He was always working late hours, but he could usually plan those late nights in advance. Tonight was supposed to be a late night project again, some tech administration thing I didn't care to grasp. But then I was able to connect something together there in my schedule where all the late nights my husband completed in the past few months and the ones from last month all coincided with Renee's trips to the laundromat. I called Michael over and over. I called and he did not answer. My mind was in such a panic that I felt drunk. I paced our house, phone ringing again and again before his voicemail took over. I thought back on how Michael was acting in those days, and I wasn't sure if I was projecting, but I could sense just the whisper of one of Renee's schemes again, missing pieces finally coming together. Then I noticed something else was missing. My husband's things that he had packed, all his luggage was gone from the neat pile we'd arranged the night before. I tore open drawers and cabinets to find it, also taking his passport and laptop. I was hyperventilating as I again looked at my phone, over 80 outgoing unanswered calls to Michael. It was starting to get dark outside. I navigated to my Find My Phone app and logged out. I knew a good deal of Michael's passwords and soon I was able to log into his account with his credentials. I activated the GPS function and saw he was on the outskirts of town, or at least his phone was hurrying to my car. I placed the phone in the cradle and sped into the night towards the small GPS ping at the edge of town near the highway. I screamed and cried as I went, and for the first time, I wished that Renee had just stayed dead. As I turned the corner of a grove of trees into an industrial parking lot, I saw them. My husband was holding my completely alive best friend by the hips. They were smiling, at least until my headlights stopped directly on them in the pickup truck they were standing by. They both seemed to recognize my car in panic. Quickly moving to the cab of the truck and driving out of the parking lot, I mumbled the license plate to myself in shock as I called the police. The last I ever saw of them was the piles of grocery bags stacked and tied down in the back of the truck. Police found them near the border with enough supplies to start a new life over the next few weeks. It was my turn to ignore their calls. Renee had been taken in for insurance fraud, and the man I thought I loved had been her accomplice. I missed all the pieces, but I finally put them all together.